Hi, my name is Emma Cook. I am the Tiny Turner and I am a professional wood turner from England. In this video we are going to turn and colour this platter. So this is a 25 centimetre blank, which is about 60 millimetres deep. 50 or 60 millimetres is fine. I'm going to turn it round and then we're going to put a tenon on here just so that we can get it into the chuck. We'll then turn the back of the platter, again turn it round, turn the front, and then we're going to use some ebonizing lacquer and some special colours, and we're going to create what's called a centrifuge piece. It's a really interesting and easy way to decorate a platter. So the majority of the piece is going to be turned with a 3/8 bowl gouge with a very short grind. So let's get started. So I brought the tool rest round to the front now so that we can clean up this face and cut our first tenon to get into the chuck. So that has just cleared the area for the chuck jaws to sit against. So we've just cleared that back, and now we can put that in between the chuck, into the chuck jaws. At this stage, you can bring the tailstock up for extra support if you want, if you feel the blank is not very stable. This feels solid, so we're going to move this out of the way because it's going to get in the way very quickly. And now we can turn the underneath of the platter, so this is the back of the platter. So we're going to clean this up and then we're going to cut either a recess or a tenon, it depends which you prefer. In this one we're going to cut a recess, and then we're going to decorate the back a little bit with a texturing tool, and then we can turn it round and finish the edges and the front face of the platter. And we're going to stick to the 3/8 bowl gouge for this. So the reason I sometimes turn with my fingers like this is because I am very short in height, and because of that I often get the shavings hitting me in the face or on my face shield. So this is just a way of protecting myself a little bit. So now we've cleaned this face up, we can now cut a recess. So because it's quite a large blank, I'm going with a recess instead of a tenon. We're going to cut that, and then we're going to start to shape the back of the platter. So because this is quite a large diameter platter, I'm going to just put a little bit of texture on the back of this just to make it a little bit more exciting. It's also a good thing to do if you're not happy with your shape, because it breaks up the line so you can kind of hide any mistakes. But yeah, it just adds a little bit of interest. So we'll turn the speed right down to about 600 RPM. So we're going to hold the tool at about 45-degree angle, and we're just going to introduce the cutter to the wood and just slowly move across that area. So good pressure. And that will just give us a little bit of spiraling. I'm going to go over that again because I want it to have a little bit more texture on there. And I'm going to hold it at slightly different angle so we don't cut the same pattern. So you will get tear out because of the end grain, but we can clean that up with a wire brush. So that just gives us a little bit of interest on the back of the platter. So I'm just going to clean this up. And then we'll sand these bits here. And the great thing is, if you don't like it, you can just turn it off and start again. So we're going to sand with the Pro Sander. We're going to start at 180 and then we're going to change heads and put some 240 and then 320. That's all we need to sand up to really for this project. Clear out the dust. We're going to put some oil on the back because it will sit into the texture nicely. So we're using oil so that we can really push it into that texture. If you get any fibres or any paper catching on there, we can just pull that off again with the wire brush. So just clean it off with the brush. Cool. So you can also use a paintbrush to apply the oil, which would avoid these fibres getting stuck. So we're now going to turn this round so that we can work on the front of the platter. We are going to lose a little bit of thickness, but that's not a bad thing because when you are trying something out for the first time, that thickness of the wood will allow us to have a practice and you can turn it off again if you don't like it. So it's a really good thing to practice on the front of the piece when we turn it round if you've got the wood to do it with. Chunky. So for the front of the platter, we're going to have quite a wide rim so that we've got plenty of room to put some colour on. So we're going to have about 50% for the rim of the platter and 50% for the bowl area. We're going to curve the rim slightly so that the colours have, what's the way to say this? So we're going to curve the rim of the platter instead of having it flat, and that will allow the colours to reflect nice and bright. So because we're turning a curve, you might find you get a lot of tear out on the end grain. So you often need to start from the high point and turn towards the outside edge for this half of the curve. And the curve that's falling away from you, you'll have to start and go in towards the centre. And that should help remove some of the tear out. I haven't taken any timber from the middle yet. That we do right at the end. And the reason for that is we're going to make a mess. So we make a mess and then we clean it all up and finish the edges and the middle after we've done all the paint work. So this is roughly the proportions we're going to finish with, but because we're going to be painting and then we're going to cut away the middle at the end, we want to make a little bit more room. So I'm going to take a couple of extra cuts and make the rim wider than it needs to be. Always give yourself that little bit extra room to work with. And I'm just using the 1/4 inch ball gouge now just because it's a little bit more manoeuvrable and can get into these close spaces a bit easier. So we're going to sand the front of this now, ready for spraying the ebonizing lacquer on, and we want to sand this to about 320 grit. You don't want to sand it too much or the lacquer won't stick, but you don't want sanding lines in it either, so it's just finding that balance. I'm going to put some sanding sealer on first so that it helps to seal the wood, and it should give us a much better finish with the ebonizing lacquer. So sanding sealer can sometimes lift the grain and make it feel a bit rough. So we're just going to take that back slightly. You can use wire wool, you can use shavings, or you can use some abrasive. So I'm just going to very gently take that back, knock that back. So that should now give us a really smooth surface to put our lacquer onto. So we're now going to take this off the lathe and we're going to spray the ebonizing lacquer whilst it is in a box. So by doing it in here, it means that we won't get the paint running, it will stay flat. And we can move it out of the way to dry, so it won't get dust settling on it. It will definitely need 2 coats, maybe even 3. So now the lacquer is dry, we can move on to the next stage, and for that we're going to use some Jo Sonja colours. This is the iridescent violet, and we're going to mix it 1-to-1 with some flow medium so that it's not too thick and so it won't spread out. We want it to spread out quite nicely. So I'm going to just pop that into a little cup and mix some flow medium, about the same quantity. And then we're going to take quite a lot on our paintbrush and we're going to place it around that inside edge. And then we've got a piece of cardboard just to protect the lathe and everything else, because all this paint is going to fly out to the sides of the platter. And we're going to turn the speed up to about 2000 RPM on this size of platter. We're going to repeat the process we just used for the paint, but this time we're going to use some metal leaf size. So this is an acrylic metal leaf size. This doesn't need thinning down with anything. It's fluid enough. It will spread out on its own. So don't put too much of this on. We put a lot of paint on so that we could get this kind of flower effect. We don't really want that with the size. And we're going to put this on straight from the bottle, and you've got to work quickly because it dries out very quickly. So we're going to put it in the same place, and we're going to twist the brush to roll the size off. Get our cardboard protector. So with the size, it's still a little bit white. We need to wait for that to go clear, and that means it's dry and ready for us to put the next product on top. Once the size is dry, we're then going to put some of these colour changing pigments. So these are chameleon pigments, but these ones are slightly clear, so they're slightly transparent. They're very, very bright on a dark background. So we've got these flakes, but because these flakes are quite big, you'll have some gaps. So we're going to go over with some powder. So this is an ethereal pigment instead of a flake. Again, it's slightly transparent, and I'm going to dust this over the top just to fill in any gaps. Okay, the size is dry, so we can apply these now. We are not going to mix these with anything. You use them straight out of the pot dry, and you apply them with a fluffy brush. So you can you pop your brush into the flakes without anything in there. So these are dry, as you can see on the brush, and you just brush them onto the size and they will stick. So don't worry about the gaps, because we will fill those later with the powder. The colour we are using is Pixie, so this is a pinky purple with a colour flip to orange. So we're now going to put the colour Galaxy, which is a purple and blue and pink colour shift. So again, you use them dry, and this is just going to fill in anywhere that the flakes have missed. So that's going to pick up any sticky areas of size. So we're just going to wipe any excess off with the brush. Once we have put our flakes or our powders on in whatever colour combination that you want, you can use one or the other or both like we have today. We need to put a coat of clear lacquer over the top of it. Only a very thin coat, just to keep everything in place and make sure when we finish turning this and sand it that we don't get any dust sticking to any size that hasn't been covered yet. So that's really important. So and that's all you need, just that amount. Once it's lacquered, we can put it back into the chuck and we can finish the turning of this platter. Once your lacquer's dry, we can finish turning. So I'm going to begin by cleaning up this outside edge, and then we're going to take the middle out. Take a bit more out of just the middle. Cool. So we'll sand that, and then I've got one more cut to make. Okay. So this now is why we lacquer first, because we can now just wipe away that dust and it doesn't affect our finish at all. And I tend to put an oil on here so that it doesn't cause any damage to our finish. Now at this stage, it's up to you whether you want to say that that is finished and put your finish on. I tend to use an oil because it doesn't interfere with any of the colours. But I tend to do one more cut, and I do this with a parting tool, and I put a line about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch from the inside here, just to break things up a little bit and make a frame. So bring the tool rest back in. One last cut. So we're going to cut with the corner at a 45-degree angle, about here. Just to frame the piece. Then we can take our finish of choice. So I often use food safe finish on the inside of bowls and platters, just in case they are going to be used for food. And as long as your lacquer is dry, we can get some in there as well. So there you have a centrifuge platter. Really, really easy to make. You can do it in lots of different colours. That is the great thing about this. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a comment and subscribe and give us a thumbs up. And we will see you in another video very soon.